So the person asks that they are an Orthodox Christian. Why is communism perceived as anti-faith? Well, the reason is that you have to remember the role of religion under feudalism and the role of religion under modern capitalism are very different. Okay? In feudal society, religion is not an option. Right? In a feudal society, the church is the state. The church and the state are almost synonymous. And peasants are told that they may not fight for their rights and that they must obey God by being peasants and not demanding justice. And if you disagree with that, you're burned at the stake. And under feudalism, religion is an essential part of propping up the feudal hierarchy. So many, Karl Marx and Marxism emerged after the overthrow and during, really, the overthrow of feudalism in Europe, right? The 1848 German Revolution that Karl Marx participated in was an anti-feudal revolution. And the main target of that anti-feudal revolution was the Roman Catholic Church. Now, there were some, there were forces like the Anabaptists that were very religious, like Protestant, fanatics, but Marx and many of the German revolutionaries in 1848 were very anti-religious. The French Revolution was very anti-religious because religion had propped up the old feudal society. Furthermore, Russia, when they had their revolution, right, the Tsar had not only had the Tsar been the king, but he had also been the Pope. He was the head of the Russian Orthodox Church. And feudalism in Russia was propped up by the church, and the church played the same role. And, China, now religion is a little bit different in China. It was not a Christian country, but in local areas, superstitions, like the idol worship and different superstitious practices were used to oppress the peasantry. And long before the communists came along, Dr. Sun Yat-sen, the founder of modern China, one of his first acts when he was a young man was to go to a temple where peasants were being forced to make sacrifices and to bow before these stone idols. And he smashed the idols, and he smashed them, and he said, this is backwardness, this is primitivism. We need to believe in science in China. And all over the world, when people have been struggling against feudalism, because in feudalism, the state and the church are almost synonymous, and because of the role of the church and the state in feudalism, religion becomes the main target. However, in a liberal capitalist society, it's quite different. In a liberal capitalist society, religion becomes far more optional. Now, there's exceptions to that, but for the most part, in the United States, you don't have to be religious if you don't want to, right? Now, when you're a child, many people argue that children's rights are violated. Children's, are forced to go to church against their will. Children are punished if they don't accept their parents' beliefs. That's true, and I experienced that myself, and it's not a good thing. But as an adult in the Western world, you can pretty much believe whatever you want. You can be an atheist, you can be a Buddhist, you can be a Muslim, you can be whatever you want. And so that gives religion a very, very, very different aspect. And based on that, I think that the relationship between communism and religion has changed. For example, Maduro is a Roman Catholic. Hugo Chavez was a Roman Catholic. Evo Morales, the leader of Socialist Bolivia, was a Roman Catholic. In the Muslim world, you have many Ba'ath Arab socialists that are Muslims. You have many Islamic anti-capitalists and anti-imperialists, right? So it's more complicated now than it used to be. It used to be that, yes, if you were rising up to overthrow a feudal society, your main target would be one of the most essential institutions in feudalism, which is the church. But now that capitalism has dominated the world, and the relationship between religion and the state has changed, and the nature of society, we don't have feudalism any longer. Things have changed. So that is why communism has been anti-faith, and that is why things have changed. The communism is now not very anti-faith. You go around the world, many communist parties around the world have openly Christian, openly Muslim, openly Jewish members. Right? The relationship has changed. If you think communists are people that go around, calling for, the elimination of religion and all that, you're a little bit out of date, right? About 100 years ago, you would be right. About 100 years ago, the word atheist and the word communist were almost synonyms. Nowadays, you'll notice that the main voices promoting atheism are ruthless defenders of capitalism, right? Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand said she was an atheist and she believed in ugly free market capitalism. The new atheist movement, Bill Maher, and who else? Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris. The main voices that are promoting atheism tend to not only be defenders of libertarian free market policies, but on top of that, they tend to also be vicious supporters of Israel and vicious advocates of imperialism in the Middle East, right? They justify it. A lot of the new atheist material, you'll notice that it has a little bit of a blind spot, right? It starts out by saying Islam is the most evil religion ever. Muslims are all terrorists. Islam is evil. Then it goes to Christianity, and it talks about Christians in the United States. Christianity in the United States is stupid, and they're bigoted against homosexuals, and they're idiots, and all of that. And then they'll, if they even touch Zionism and Judaism, it's very light. It'll be, in Bill Maher's movie Religulous, he says that Orthodox Jews are silly because they have silly hats. And then it leads to the conclusion that that all the people around the world, and this is how Religulous ends. Bill Maher's Religulous ends by showing the Irish freedom struggle, by showing the Palestinian freedom struggle, and saying, oh, look, all of this conflict is caused by religion. As if the Irish people, they don't really want to be free. They're just a bunch of religious bigots. The Palestinians, they don't want to be free. They're just a bunch of religious bigots. New atheism is toxic. And generally, it's a pipeline to white supremacism and the alt-right, right? It starts out, these young men, generally young men, who grew up in families that were deeply evangelical and conservative. They get, they discover, oh my gosh, that the Bible isn't literally true. They become new atheists. And based on that, they're very Islamophobic and all of that, because the new atheist movement tends to tell you that Islam is the most evil religion. So then after that, they decide they're libertarians, right? Because not only are they smarter than everyone who believes in God, they're smarter than anyone who would want, poor people to get welfare or want, there to be a minimum wage, because they've read Adam Smith and they've read Friedrich von Hayek and all of this stuff. And then after a little while, they start, reading these outdated pseudoscience claims that some races are smarter and inherently better than others. And that's where you get white supremacists. This is a very well-documented pipeline that young men in the United States from conservative families who become new atheists tend to go on. A lot of the people that are now going around promoting white supremacism are people who started out as people in deeply religious families who became new atheists. New atheism is very toxic. Atheism is fine, if you don't want to believe in God, that's your business, right? And there's plenty, look, having grown up around evangelicals, there are plenty of very, 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 very dumb things said by evangelicals, okay? I don't want to offend anybody here, but I have, I can understand, that if you grow up around evangelicals, you go through an atheist phase. I was an atheist for a while, but, I was able to, rediscover my faith. And I rediscovered my faith when it became a matter of choice. And when, through my lived experience, and it was a different thing, right? But when I was growing up around evangelicals, when religion was being forced on me, when I was feeling alienated from the community I was in, when a lot of very, very not well thought out statements were constantly being made by people to justify why you should never question anything said by religion, I, in response to that, I was very much an atheist. But then as my life went on, and as I traveled the world, and as I questioned why I do things, and as I came to terms with who I am and why I do things, I rediscovered my faith. And it's a personal journey. And that is one thing I'm absolutely clear about. I believe that religion is a personal matter, right? If you want to talk to me about my religion, I'll talk to you about it, but that's my business, right? And I don't care what your religion is. You can be an atheist, you could be a Muslim, you can be Jewish, you can be Buddhist, you can believe in pantheism or paganism, or I don't care, right? And there should be no religious test in any revolutionary or leftist organization. No one should be told they need to adopt specific religious beliefs to be in it. No one should be told they're not welcome because of their religious beliefs. And I will work with anyone of any religious faith, and that revolutionary organizations should be secular, right? That it's a private matter. Your religion, your relationship with God, your spiritual beliefs is your personal private business. And it has no place running the government. I do not believe in a theocracy or a religious state. And I believe in the separation of church and state, and I believe in freedom of conscience. Everyone's faith journey and everyone's spiritual beliefs are their own personal beliefs and no one else's. And that is my position. And it always has been. But if you're asking me why has communism historically been atheist, that's why. And why, but that's not the case anymore. In fact, the main voices promoting atheism are vicious imperialists and vicious anti-communists. Meanwhile, most of the forces in the world today, with the exception of China, that are promoting communism are friendly and sympathetic to religion. So there you go. All right. Okay. What do I think of the Heritage Foundation? The Heritage Foundation is a neoconservative think tank, and they are advocates of U.S. military interventionism. They are vicious anti-communists. They are Republican Party aligned, and I don't like them. I don't like them one bit. I'm not a big fan of the Heritage Foundation. Not a fan. Not a fan of them. Not a fan of them. Just like I'm not a fan of the American Enterprise Institute, just like I'm not a fan of the Council on Foreign Relations. I tend to not like capitalism and imperialism. I tend to be more of a socialist kind of guy. If you haven't caught up on that yet while watching these lives, just letting you know now, I'm a socialist. I don't like capitalism. I believe in a world where the banks, factories, and industries are organized to serve public good, not profits. That's what I'm about, so just letting you all know. All right, now someone asked about malignancy. Can someone define malignancy for me? Because I believe this is a question that deserves an answer, but I want to give it an answer that is legitimate. So could someone put in the chat the definition of the term malignancy? Can someone give me the definition so I can respond properly? What is malignancy? I do not know I want to get the definition correct before I respond. I think Infrared has a video about why defining words with definitions is not exactly correct, but, well, in this case, I'm going to need someone to give me a definition before I can totally respond. General sour feelings toward everyone and everything. Well, and the person asked about malignancy on the left. Well, in my book on Kamala Harris and the Future of America, I actually talk about some interesting facts. I don't know, Jared. I don't know about that. Never heard that. I talk about some interesting facts. Look, there's a very important book by Sigmund Freud, and it's called Civilization and Its Discontents. What's interesting is I don't agree with a lot of what Sigmund Freud says in that book. His conclusions, I think, are fundamentally wrong. However, he makes a lot of very astute observations in his book, Civilization and Its Discontents. He talks about a number of things. First of all, Sigmund Freud reflects on the fact that a lot of his patients who are religious, he says, they have this feeling of oneness, and that's what makes them feel good about being religious. They feel this connection with the universe, they feel this spiritualness, and that is what drives them to be religious. And he says he doesn't understand that because he doesn't feel that. Then he goes on to talk about how human beings have built-in sexual impulses and impulses toward aggression, and that what civilization is training people to control their impulses. Right? You can't walk around naked. You can't just punch somebody because you feel like it. That civilization, what we do is we train people. We come up with rules and laws to force people to control their impulses, their impulse toward aggression and their impulse toward sexuality, so that we can work together in groups as human beings and build a civilization. I think he's right about that. Right, he's right about the first one, the religiousness. I've experienced that. That's why and on top of that, he's right about the control of impulses. And he talks about how the revolutions that have swept Europe, really, the revolutions to overturn feudalism, really what was going on there was a renegotiation of the regulation of those impulses. We all have an impulse toward aggression. We want to tear things down. We have anger within us. We are outraged. We feel things are not fair. And we have these impulses. And that the way, and Freud doesn't say this, but I observe in my Kamala Harris book that a lot of the way that socialists and communists have taken power flows from the tradition of the French Revolution. In the French Revolution, in order to overturn feudalism, the French capitalists unleashed impulses. They unleashed the sexual and aggressive impulses of the population. They gave people permission to unleash their anger, and they gave people permission to unleash their sexual desires. And in doing so, they created a social explosion that enabled feudalism to be overturned and capitalism to be created. And that largely what leftists have done, unfortunately, is leftism has become synonymous with the releasing of impulses. Leftists generally approach society saying, we give you permission to release your impulses. And obviously Marxism is about a lot more than that, and there's a lot of left-wing ideologies. But if leftism is stripped of ideology, if it is simply an emotional movement, it gives people permission to release those impulses. And if you look at the woke crowd, if you look at the SJWs on the internet, you look at cancel culture, that's what it is. It is these people's impulses towards aggression and their impulses towards sexuality being released. And stripped of ideology, leftism, reduced to simply its psychological content, is nothing but the releasing of impulses. However, if you look at the socialist societies that have developed around the world, like the Soviet Union, like China, like Cuba, like Venezuela, those societies have been successful not by releasing people's impulses. Maybe there was a releasing of impulses at the beginning in order to make a revolution. However, if you look at what made Stalin's 5-year economic plans that made Russia a superpower and defeated the Nazis, you look at what made them successful, it wasn't releasing impulses. It was appealing to that feeling of religiousness. It was bringing the people of Russia and the Soviet Union together to work for a common aim and to feel a spiritual drive as if they were all in it together. If you look at China, the Cultural Revolution was a releasing of impulses, and it was awful, and it's remembered as an awful thing. But why is the Communist Party of China so loved? Because it creates a feeling of oneness. It creates a common humanity of the people. It brings people together and unleashes them to do amazing things together. And the mistake of communists is instead of appealing to that feeling of religiousness that Sigmund Freud is talking about, they appeal to that releasing of impulses. And that as we get away from feudalism and as we deal with a liberal society and capitalism, if leftist politics are going to be powerful, coast to coast AM, Jesus. If leftist politics are going to become powerful, we need to reorient away from appealing to people's aggressive impulses and sexual impulses, and instead toward creating that feeling of religiousness and oneness. And that the malignancy, I guess, I just learned a new word tonight, malignancy. The malignancy that people are describing on the left is a result of post-Cold War leftist politics, leftist ideology, and Marxist scientific ideology being stripped away, but that releasing of impulses and the psychological drive to release one's impulses becoming dominant. And instead, my feeling is that socialism and Marxism need to try to strive for those feelings of oneness. That has been my position for a long time, and that wokeism and IDPol and synthetic leftism and the destructive politics, the releasing of impulses, look, that is the problem of leftism. We need to start building movements, organizations, and communities that appeal to that feeling of oneness that the Soviet Union and China were able to appeal to in order to build great societies. I've seen that in Venezuela, that feeling of oneness, that sense of community. I mean, look, I'm just telling you that we need to change the psychological appeal of socialism. Socialism needs to become a constructive ideology rather than a destructive ideology. That has long been my position.